Another commitment, another recruit commits to Pitt in the 2024 recruiting class. Didn't we just do this yesterday? Didn't we just talk about a recruit committing yesterday? Well, here we are. There's another one in, and it's somebody we've been talking about for pretty much all of July. So let's carry that conversation into August as Pitt landed its quarterback for the 2024 recruiting class. We get a lot to talk about right here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Tuesday. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find all your Pitt coverage right there at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with other Pitt fans. I mean, all day, every day. Pitt fans are on the message boards talking about Pitt sports, whether it's football, it's basketball, it's recruiting. They're talking about it all right there at Panther-Lair.com. And if you're a Pitt fan, you want to be part of that conversation, you need to go check out the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find right there at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. And of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can all kinds of stuff. And it's only going to get busier here with our video content. We're still going to have these daily Morning Pitt videos. We'll have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com get together, talk a little Pitt sports with you. And then we have had player interviews and recruit interviews and that kind of thing. But with training camp starting on Wednesday, yes, tomorrow, we're going to have practice highlights and Pat Narduzzi interviews and post-practice interviews and players and all that kind of stuff. It's assistant coaches and all those kinds of things. We're going to have all of it for you here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You want to make sure you don't miss any of that video content. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The subscribe button is right down there. If you click that, you can turn on notifications. You'll get an alert sent to your phone. And that way you'll never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And as the season goes on, I mean, it's going to keep ramping up because we'll have our daily Morning Pitt videos, and we'll have the Wednesday night live show, and then we'll have our post-game shows, and then we'll have this, and we'll have that, and who knows what else. I mean, we're just going to be on here all the time. Whenever we're not on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, we're going to be right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe. Now is the time to do it so you don't forget and you don't miss any of our video content throughout the month of August heading into the season. So yesterday, couldn't really do a training camp preview episode. I mean, we've been talking about training camp all summer, so it's not like, we haven't been previewing training camp. But yesterday, the Monday at the start of the week, when training camp is starting, didn't really get into some training camp preview stuff because, Pitt got a commitment. 4-star running back Yassine Willis committed on Saturday night, or announced his commitment on Saturday night, so we had to talk about that on Monday. So, okay, we'll do our training camp preview stuff today. Well, we can't because now Pitt got another commitment. And so we got recruiting to talk again, and this time it was a local prospect. It was Julian Dugger, Penn Hills quarterback, a local kid, a Whitfield quarterback committed to Pitt last night. And this is one that we've been talking about for a while. This is one that we've been I don't want to say hyping up, but I mean, we've been talking about it for the last month and a half or so, probably about the last 5 weeks or so. And the story really goes back to late June when Pitt had a passing camp and Penn Hills took part. It was a 7-on-7 team tournament and Penn Hills took part. I don't think they won the whole thing, but they got pretty far. They did pretty well. And the star of the show was Julian Duggar. And from talking to different people who watched the camp, different people, who were there and attendance, people who know what they're talking about, people who've been watching these prospect camps, these 7-on-7 camps for a long, long time, because Pitt's been holding them for a long, long time. The word I got was that was one of the best performances by a quarterback in the history of those passing camps, or at least the last 10 years or so, as long as anyone can remember. Julian Duggar just lit it up, just hit all the throws, made great reads. And yeah, it's 7-on-7. It's not pad football. It's not real football. There's no pass rush. There's no real blocking. It's just making reads and throwing. But he did everything he needed to do that day to impress Frank Cignetti and and really draw renewed interest from the Pitt coaching staff, because they actually offered Julian Duggar last spring of 2022. You can go back and find the articles. They offered Julian Duggar, and it was kind of one of these offers where we're offering you as an athlete. Maybe you can play quarterback, maybe you can play a different position, but we just want to get you on campus. And so that was nice, and it was a good story. But then it kind of fell off. And there wasn't a whole lot of contact over the next year or so, really leading up to that passing camp. And then and I think there's a variety of reasons for that. I think Frank Cignetti and John DiBiaso, the assistant quarterbacks coach at the time, I think they had their eyes elsewhere. They were looking at this guy or that guy and maybe missing the guy who was right up the street in Penn Hills. So he comes to this passing camp. After a lot's changed in the state of Pitt's quarterback recruiting board, Julian Duggar comes to the passing camp at the end of June, puts on a show, lights it up, and Frank Cignetti says, wait, I think this kid might be able to play for us. Takes him in, puts him up on the board, talks football with him for a while, and comes away even more impressed. So they go through the month of July. They sort of tentatively plan to get back together again. Because most of the month of July is a dead period, which means recruits can't visit coaches can't visit recruits. There's no in-person contact allowed between a coach and a recruit. But they get to the end of July, there's this little quiet period for about a week here before training camp starts. Quiet period means that the recruits can come visit the schools and be on campus and be around the coaches on campus. And so they leave with a tentative plan for Julian Duggar to come back and hang out for a day sometime in the end of July. So he does that. And it was last Thursday. Last Thursday was his visit, his unofficial visit. And he spends a lot of time with Frank Cignetti talking about football and talking about plays and this and that. He spends time with Pat Narduzzi. And when he's with Pat Narduzzi says to him, look, we want you to know that it's very clear that you have an offer, that we want you to come and play here. And I felt, and I think I said this in early July, because after I watched Julian Duggar throw in person at a camp, second week of July or so, I did one of these videos where I said Julian Duggar makes sense for Pitt as the quarterback in the 2024 recruiting class. I said, and I laid out all the reasons why. And I said at the time that I had this distinct impression that if ever there was a point where Pitt, whether it's Frank Cignetti or Pat Narduzzi, said, Julian, we want you to be here. You have an offer, and we want you to be a part of our program. That if that time came, it wouldn't take long for Julian Duggar to say, okay, I want to do it. And it took about 4 days. It went from Thursday to Monday. Thursday, they had that conversation. Monday morning, he woke up and said, yeah, I'm not waiting any longer. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that it took him that long. I think he knew he wanted to go to Pitt. I think he knew that if the opportunity truly presented itself, he would take it. It did, and he did. And now Pitt's got a quarterback for the 2024 recruiting class. And I think there's a lot of angles to sort of examine here. First of all, let's talk about Duggar. Before we get into the other stuff of, why they took him, or if they did this, or if they did that, or if it was because they missed on these guys, or did this, or whatever. Let's talk about Julian Duggar himself. His 6'3", 205-pound quarterback. He's a basketball player. He can dunk. I retweeted I forgot who it was. I think Brad Everett, who writes for the Post-Gazette or is on strike from the Post-Gazette. But Brad Everett covers high schools and tweeted a video of Julian Duggar dunking an alley-oop. The Loyal Sons, our friends of the Loyal Sons, retweeted it, and I retweeted it from those guys. So you can find it on Twitter. I mean, he's 6'3", and he can get up and dunk. There's no, so the athleticism is there. And I think that's an important point that I'm going to keep coming back to, because I'm going to keep saying this phrase. There's not a lot of downside to taking Julian Duggar. All right? 6'3", 205-pound quarterback. He's big, he's tall, he's got long arms, he's athletic, he can throw the ball really, really well. And when I did the video, it was probably like second week of July. I did a video, I said it makes sense for Pitt to take Julian Duggar as the quarterback in this 2024 recruiting class. And I kind of interspersed my takes with some live video of Duggar throwing. And I think you can see him making throws. You can see the arm talent that's there. Now, one of the challenges with Julian Duggar is you don't see as much of the arm talent when you watch his tape from Penn Hills. The throws are there. He makes good throws. He makes good plays. But he only attempted about 130 passes last year. That's not a lot. The example that I always bring up, the comparison point that I always make, is Rodney Gallagher from Laurel Highlands, 4-star athlete who's going to West Virginia. And he's going to West Virginia to play quarterback. Wide receiver. Pitt was recruiting him to play wide receiver. Nobody ever really talked about Rodney Gallagher playing quarterback in college because that's not the position he's going to play. At Laurel Highlands, he was the quarterback because he was more of like a wildcat quarterback. He was a running quarterback. He was the best athlete on the team, so they put the ball in his hands. He attempted more passes than Julian Duggar did. They were a one-dimensional offense. Their leading rusher at Penn Hills ran the ball 150 times, and Duggar threw the ball 130 times. Duggar also had 67 rushing attempts and averaged like more than 7 yards per carry because, again, he's a plus athlete. He's got great speed. He's got good moves. He can get out and run, and he's also got a big arm and can throw. I think the, sort of low volume in the passing game hurt his recruitment and probably held it back a little bit. There's also, unfortunately, and I think Pitt fans are a little bit immune to this because for obvious reasons, but there's a little bit of a stigma when it comes to left-handed quarterbacks. And again, as I say, Pitt fans and those of us who have watched this program for a long time, we're a little immune to it because of Rod Rutherford and Tyler Palko. We've seen good left-handed quarterbacks. We've seen good, left-handed quarterbacks make a lot of plays and really excel. But not everybody's open to that. Not everybody's open to changing their protection scheme and not just moving the right tackle to left or vice versa, but how you call the protections and how you set the protections, and everything has to be opposite. And if your backup is a right-handed quarterback, then you got to have everything planned both ways. There are college coaches, and I've been told this multiple times, who just will dismiss a left-handed quarterback out of hand. And just, no, we don't have any interest in it. Nope, not doing it. And I think, does that entirely account for Julian Duggar's lack of offers? No. Does him only throwing 130 passes last year entirely account for his lack of offers? No. Do I think a player with his measurables, his athleticism, should have more offers? Yes. Am I a little surprised that he doesn't? Yes. And something that's been brought up is the fact that he went to a bunch of camps in June. Went to, a bunch of prospect camps at Power 5 schools and FBS schools and really didn't come away with much in the way of even FBS offers, let alone Power 5 offers. And you say, well, why did that happen? And there, I think probably part of the reason, and again, there's never just one reason of, well, it's this and that's it. It's a multitude of factors. Maybe there's a handful of schools over here who, the schools that he camped with, who already have a quarterback for the 2024 recruiting class. Because the reality is, by the time you get to June before the senior year, a lot of top quarterbacks are off the board. And a lot of schools have already filled their quarterback spot in that year's recruiting class. Quarterback recruiting tends to happen earlier. You tend to get those commitments earlier in the cycle. By the time you get to June, there are fewer spots available. So there might be some schools out there that he camped with that just don't have room for a quarterback. They already got their guy. And then maybe some schools that he camped with that do have an opening for a quarterback, but a few of them aren't really into left-handed quarterbacks. And then there's a few that, well, they might take one, but boy, he hasn't thrown that many passes in high school, and we don't really know. I think it's a combination of factors has sort of led Julian Duggar to this spot. But I think when you look at a guy his size with his athleticism and can throw the ball like he can and can run, you can't convince me that's not an FBS quarterback. You can't convince me he doesn't have the tools to be an effective FBS quarterback. Now I'm going to come back to my repeated phrase that there's really very little downside to taking him. Because if for whatever reason, it doesn't work out with Julian Duggar at quarterback, he can play wide receiver. He's talented enough to play wide receiver. And you can't say that about every quarterback that Pitt has been recruiting this year. And a lot of quarterbacks. You watch that alley-oop video, there's not a lot of quarterbacks that can do that can get up and dunk like that. He's a unique athlete who truly could move to another position if for some reason quarterback doesn't work out. And I don't say that because I think quarterback won't work out. I'm more than willing to give him a chance. I'm more than willing to believe that it can work out and will work out. If for some reason it doesn't, he can absolutely play another position. Now, with the depth setup that Pitt's got, with Christian Vieira's got a few years, Nate Yarnell's got a few years, Ty Diefenbach, they can always get more transfers. There's no need for Julian Duggar to come in and play right away in 2024. They're not going to be relying on him to be the starter as a freshman or even as a redshirt freshman. He's going to have time to develop. He's going to have time to work with Frank Cignetti or whoever the offensive coordinator is at that point, and he's going to have time to grow into a role or find out that maybe quarterback doesn't work and he plays somewhere else. And again, I don't say that to disparage his talents. I'm just saying that that is also on the table because of the kind of athlete he is. Very little downside. And in this era of college football, with the portal and the impact that it's having, particularly on the quarterback position, finding a local quarterback with his measurables and the little very low downside, I mean, that seems like a pretty good outcome. Now, you might turn around and say, dude, he's like a plan D or plan E or plan C or what did somebody say? Plan H target at quarterback. They missed on Henry Hasselbeck and they missed on Tyler Cherry and they stopped recruiting Drew Devlier, and they missed on Miles O'Neill and Trevor Jackson seems to be slipping away. And well, this is just what they've resorted to. I have a few thoughts about that. All right, yeah, they missed on those guys you talked about. Hasselbeck, O'Neill, those guys you talked about. I'm having a conversation with myself here. I'm referring to myself in the second person. Hasselbeck, O'Neill, Cherry, they missed on those guys. There's no question about it. And if they'd gotten one of those guys, we're probably not sitting here talking about this right now. But they didn't get one of those guys. And so they were pretty much down from their original group as it stood in like May. They're pretty much down to Trevor Jackson, quarterback from Florida, works with Rod Rutherford actually, and is very high on Pitt. Took an official visit to Pitt, really likes Pitt. But after a big performance at the Elite 11, he's been getting more offers and more interest. Schools like Ole Miss and UCLA are getting involved. And so his recruitment has sort of changed a little bit. Did Pitt take a commitment? Did Pitt decide to go all in on Julian Duggar and take a commitment from Julian Duggar because they felt like Trevor Jackson was slipping away? I would say it like this. I think after the performance of the passing camp, Frank Cignetti sat back and looked at it. He asked himself a question. He said, am I comfortable with Julian Duggar being the guy in this class? And he didn't act on it right away. He waited until the end of July. Remember, this was Thursday. Okay, the passing camp was, I think, the last Saturday in June or the next to last Saturday in June. And we're talking about the final Thursday in July before he finally says the words, yes, we want you, you have an offer. So they take a month to think about it and maybe feel out Jackson a little bit. But I think by the time they get to that visit on Thursday, as he meets with him and he talks with him and, he's a good kid, a good player, smart, and all these things, he asks himself a question and he says, am I comfortable with Julian Duggar being the guy in this class? If that's who we end up with, am I comfortable with that? And the answer is yes. And so they move forward and they push for Duggar and they land him. Is it a concession of losing Trevor Jackson? I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily look at it that way because I think with Duggar, when you look at his offer sheet and you look at where he stands right now in his recruitment, you probably, if you were really, I think if you were Frank Cignetti and you see a huge separation between Jackson and Duggar, in Cignetti's perception, then there's no reason not to continue waiting on Jackson until you become clearly eliminated. That he commits to another school, and then you can move on because Duggar will probably still be there. The fact that they push for Duggar right now makes me think that they decided, you know what? Not going to go out and I'm not going to say Duggar's better than Jackson or equal to Jackson, but that they're close enough that they were comfortable taking Duggar and feeling good about who they got in this class. So I don't necessarily consider it, conceding the recruitment of Jackson. I mean, they've effectively ended the recruitment of Jackson by taking another quarterback, but I don't take that to mean that they were say, oh, well, we're just never going to get him. Because, again, you could keep pushing for him. You could keep working that. You never know what would happen over the next month or 2 months or 3 months. If you really like Jackson that much more than how much you like Duggar right now, you could keep going after him. You didn't need to take this commitment right now, but they took it. And that makes me think that for Frank Cignetti at least, and Pat Narduzzi, Duggar's good enough to be the guy. I think there's very little downside in taking him. So I think it's a good pickup for Pitt. Like I said, I thought it made sense. I said that a month ago or a few weeks ago, and I'll say it again here. And I'm excited to see what Julian Duggar does this year. I think Penn Hills, he says Penn Hills is going to try and open up the offense a little bit, throw it a little bit more. I'd like to see him get the opportunity to do that because I think there's a lot of talent there. I've seen it in person, and I'm excited to see it on film when he goes out there and plays his senior year. So that's a quarterback for the 2024 recruiting class. Pitt has their guy now, and he's in. And it's Julian Duggar from Penn Hills. So congratulations to Julian. And maybe tomorrow we'll finally have some training camp preview. I mean, we should. Tomorrow's the first day of camp, so probably have just a little bit to talk about to get you ready for training camp. We also have to run down the defensive tackles this week. We got a lot to do, and it's not going to slow down again until like February. But by then it'll be hoop season, so it's not going to slow down again until next July. So I hope you enjoyed July. July's over. It's heavy full-time sports all the way through till next July. So we'll see you then. But between now and then, we'll do a lot of these Morning Pitt episodes, including tomorrow. So make sure you don't want to miss any of it. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can stay tuned to everything we do here. And then head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to keep on top of all the latest Pitt sports news. Thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate it. Training camp starts tomorrow, so I hope you're ready. We will be ready. And if you stay tuned right here, you'll be ready too. The Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.